let's get into it. Like one of the things I was really excited about chatting with you about was, the real world needs of clients at agencies. As a guy with a background in some decently sized agencies of some repute, both positive and negative, depending on your opinion in the world, of how people feel about agencies. I think one of the, not you, I'm just saying in general, I think one of the big issues is agencies aren't necessarily aligned with the real world needs of their clients. I think there's a gap kind of happening there.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, like, how you feel about, or as somebody that has built successful agencies and gotten exits and really built the structure.
Yeah.
Like, how do you feel the agency's needs are, or how do you position caring about the real world needs of the clients at the agencies? Because I think, to be fair, there are agencies that can fail clients, but there's also a lot of clients that can just wildly fail the agency because it's a simpatico relationship.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. So first of all, I'd love to take credit for the building and the exiting, but I'm supportive of great founders that I worked with. And
there you go. I love it. I love it. And look at that, man. This is fantastic.
Yeah, exactly. But no, I think this is really brings up a great point, because agencies, there's so many of them, right? And it's hard to really know when you're finding a good one. Plus, you look at some of the really big ones that have grown and built, giant brand names. And then, how do you know that you're really getting the treatment that you need, that you're getting the most value for the money that you're spending? And, a lot of them, they get very bloated and they become process heavy. And there's kind of like a medium that needs to be found for every brand at the unique stage that they're in and what their need is. So it's great when you can find an agency partner that you're with for 2, 3, 4, 5 more, years. But a lot of brands, like, they do need to evolve and graduate and say, like, hey, they were really great for this stage or these last 2 years of where we were, and then we needed to make a change for someone new. So I think for agencies to really be the best that they can be for brands, there's a lot of accountability that needs to happen on both sides, right? So the brand has to make sure that they've got strong management that's managing the agency, asking the right questions, has someone that's dedicated and has knowledge in terms of what they're doing. And then there also has to be really good expectations that are set when you're making that agency decision. What do we need help with? How much do I actually need the agency to take over? And how much do we want to have in control? And then there's some gray area in terms of, like, well, where do we want to be collaborative as well? Or do we have another vendor, like, let's say a creative agency and you're the media agency, and, like, how do we want that relationship not only to collaborate, but to be, like, really, symbiotic as well? Like, everything has to work really nicely. So there's an accountability piece in terms of, like, the client really managing the agency, and vice versa, managing the client. Like you called out, clients can be difficult too. But I think for a really great agency, especially in the performance marketing space, which is where I come from, where everything is about results, gotta be ahead of the curve, right? You can't just find a product that works and you're like, okay, great, this has been really successful this year and the previous year. Like, you have to adopt technology. You have to make sure that, like, you're evolving at the same rate that the creative messaging is evolving, that all the social media platforms are evolving. Where's the younger generation going? Where are all the impressions and eyeballs shifting to? So there's got to be really strategic leadership and a lot of innovation on the agency side, I think, to really, create and continue to evolve the best possible product for their clients.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And it's funny you're talking about, like, there is something I saw today that I feel like I want clients to know that the people that work at agencies are also aware of sometimes this lack of symbiosis. As a former supervisor at Omnicom of Resolution Media, there's an organized, like, walkout, because the average pay is $50K and the CEO makes $20 million a year. I saw that on oh my God, what's that Instagram account? Chadvertising. Oh yeah, Chadvertising. Love Chadvertising and Baller Busters. Two of my favorite like advertising. Like the Baller Busters. I don't know if you've seen that one.
I haven't seen that one, but I follow digital advertising a lot. I saw
Yeah,
the
no,
whole
Chadvertising is excellent.
yeah, I'm
Shout out to Chadvertising, not a sponsor. Check them out.
yeah.
Right. And then Baller Busters is great too, because they just take all the like hacky gurus and they're just like, oh, by the way. And then like it's a like if you think the person on the sales call is not legitimate, go to Baller Busters, and if they're mentioned, 100% not legit.
Okay.
But yeah, and I just shared a video on my channel about how I used to spend $1 million a day
Yeah.
at a 20% commission. And I made 75K a year.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that would make
It's
$1
quite a
million a
markup.
week profit.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that is ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want people out there to know that, like, people at agencies are aware of when that's happening. And I think it's also good to know that, like, people not every, like, I think some folks have an opinion of the agency world. And I want people to know they're not all bad. Like, they're very good people in the agency world. It's just at some point it gets bought out by a holding company and bought out by a holding company and bought out by a holding company. And then it's a bank.
Yeah, yes. I think that's actually a really good point, right? Because you have the big five and you've got all the agencies that have been acquired by the big five and are kind of like living in that ecosystem. And then you have all the startups, right? So I think in my experience, I work with a lot of growth stage agencies, which is where, you know, my focus is. There's a lot more on, I think, the profit sharing side. Now they all have different approaches. I can speak to, like, you know, the agency that I came from. We were very transparent. Like, it was commission based. Essentially, there was an ask for people to kind of take a haircut on their base with uncapped commission. It was very transparent. You know, your level of your role was on like a document that everyone that was your peer that did the same job had access to. So the salaries there was a lot of transparency there. And then it was commission based. So if you crushed it, and it was all communicated and agreed to, so everyone knew exactly like how much of the take home they would get. And the better they did, if they could actually scale their clients and we could bill more, they would earn more. So you had a lot of people that were, you know, really doing very well. The clients are doing well because, like, their campaign managers and their teams are heavily incentivized for them to perform, right? Like, most of the time, the majority of the time, like in an ideal world, you're only scaling if there are results there. And we're talking about, you know, previously, like, accountability on the client side. If they're just scaling inefficiently, you know, it's on them. And a lot of them, you know, if they're savvy enough, they're pre-negotiating that. You know, in terms of whatever they're like, hey, we're not scaling, we're bumping budget. But you know, the staff is highly incentivized. That creates a really competitive environment, right? So you have the best of the best that's sticking around. The people that can't hang, you don't really need to fire them because they're going to leave.
Yeah.
And you have this like natural progression of like only having great marketers that are there. They're competing with each other. It's a really healthy environment. And like that proved to be really successful. So I think like you see that more with these, you know, kind of entrepreneurial environments, not so much with the bigger ones. But if you're, you know, a brand and you're looking to hire an agency, these are things that you might not think about or know to ask that you should be asking in terms of like, how is the team structured? How are they compensated? How are they incentivized? Like, you want to know who you're working with, meet them, and understand how they're actually incentivized. Is this just a job to them? Do I need to stay on their ass 24/7 to make sure I'm getting results? Or is it more of a partnership? And you want your client to make it feel like this is a true partnership.
No, absolutely. And I think that really brings it straight to, like, everything is as good as the foundation, right? So it's like, from either the agency side, and for the record, I think we were talking about this right beforehand, and I think this is a great way to put it.
Yeah.
We were talking about, like, I like to say work is never done. It's just in various stages of completion. I think everybody that's freelancing is running an agency. It's just that agency might have one client or it might have like 50. Like, you're still, in the way that we're talking about it, it is a service industry job where you are being outsourced to deliver something for somebody. Depending on however your org structure is, it's still relevant. So with that in mind, this is not just about, 20 client, 100 client, 50 media buyers with 8 clients a piece, like agencies, which, like I remember those days a couple times. Jefferson Boulevard in Marina Del Rey, if that means anything to anybody, like, whew. But yeah, so with that being said, like, I think it's all about the foundation. I think you're only as good as, where you get started. I think it's very hard to recover when you have a bad foundation. So talk to me about like maximizing your relationship with the agency and the client at the very beginning, and what are some of the biggest pitfalls to avoid there? Because I think so many people are just like, oh, I just got paid. And either they're really nervous because they don't know they can deliver, or they're like on the other end of the spectrum where we're talking about these more illegitimate agencies that are more like a bank. They're just like, fantastic, I need to get to that second contract being written so that I can give this to an entry-level employee and get my good ones onto the next client.
Yeah. I mean, I think everyone that has kind of gone off on their own, you can define it as an agency, but you're a service provider, right? Yeah. It's all about relationship. And I think that there's, we've talked about this before. There's like the actual value that you drive, and then there's the perceived value that you drive. And I think that they're weighted equally. And the perceived value is not a lie, right? It shouldn't be smoke and mirrors. It should be the gray area. Like, that's how I put it. It is really more about like the relationship building. It's the setting of expectations. It's communicating properly. It's making sure that like you and your client or clients are all on the same page. Really setting the tone, I think, from the sales process. And look, like, you're trying to close someone, obviously there's a sale involved, but once you're in there, right, like, there's no value in closing that deal or going through the sales process if you're not going to have a lengthy relationship. Like, that's where the value is going to exist. So once that contract is signed, right, like, how are you actually setting expectations appropriately? And I think creating perceived value with that client. So even though the contract's signed, how am I adding incremental value to what they see right now? I think a lot of that comes down to like, asking really intelligent questions, making sure that you're spending time really getting to know their business, what the pain points are. Ask them, what their customers' pain points are, right? Like, what are the objections and fears that your customers have? How can I use that with whatever the services that I'm providing, whether it's advising or if it's media or if it's creative? Like, you want to have a good understanding of that. And I think if you're working with, regardless of who you're working with, but especially if you're working with a founder and that baby, that product or business is their baby, they're really going to appreciate like these types of questions, because you really want to dig in and understand. And then separately from the business, just get to know them as people, right? So I think that's what really creates, this strong, stickiness, that value, like, gets really deep into the gray area where they start saying, okay, I'm really seeing this person as a partner, not just as a vendor or an agency or a service provider.
Yeah, no, I love that, because I think, everything is colored by the first impression, right? And I think so many people just wildly undervalue that. And above and beyond just that first impression of the conversation, it's also like, how you're being treated, right? Yeah. And at the end of the day, it is, I like to consider it like a service industry job.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I think, and what's odd is that in it being a service industry job, the best people at the gig of actually doing the work aren't necessarily the best people to like talk to clients and be the onboarding. Yeah. And there's always sometimes you have the client manager, and your org structure can handle that, because like I think there's an issue that we have this really good media buyers are very like alpha mentality, like entrepreneurs, right? Like, I like to think of it as it's like a fighter pilot or like a Wall Street bank. Like, you watch like Wolf of Wall Street, like that. Like, I've been in that room where it's ad agency dudes just crushing like $1 million days. Yeah. Like, and it's just like, the people that are really good, and then the people that are really nice, and the people that are really nice tend to do bad work and keep the clients for a lot longer. And the people that are really good tend to leave the agency and start their own thing. And like there's that whole ecosystem of that.
I don't know if the people that are really nice keep the clients always for longer, but I've seen them, they keep clients for a lot longer than they should have.
I'll take that. Yeah. People stick around for a lot longer than they probably should have been there. 100%.
Yeah.
They can work in recovery or like the loss prevention department, basically. Is to give you like the really nice person. I remember there's a couple, like I was at a spot where these two girls were fantastic at it.
Yeah.
And it's not, I think men and women can both be great at this, but you could give any client to one of these two women that was like 10 days and they were gone, and they would stick around for another 6 months, even though it was terrible, even though like there's absolutely no reason they should be there. And
100%. That's all relationships, right? And
100%.
Like, you're right. I think, I think that's a good way to describe like who you're going to see on the media side at an agency. You're going to see like, I don't know, the digital chads that are just going to come in and just crush and destroy, and they're gurus and they're growth hackers, and the performance will be there. And they're definitely the more innovative folks, a little bit more entrepreneurial. But you've got like on the other side, the perceived value people. Not to say that they don't have actual value, like they do, but their strength is going to be in the relationship building. It's going to be in the storytelling. A little bit less in the execution. But I also think that there's a beauty in like having an agency where you can have a team, especially if you're pairing people up, right? Like strategically pairing one of each of those folks up, or having, I mean, that's really why there's an account manager. Or a client success director, whoever's really the relationship manager that can really step in and be the communication point of contact for the jet pilot to really go in there and execute and be, precise and be a warrior. So I think, looking at your personnel and staff and like looking at the different ways that you pair people up and evaluate talent, who can be a manager and who can be an executor, and an individual contributor, like that's really critical in terms of just managing a team.
No, I totally agree. And with that being said, knowing that there's multiple roles and knowing that there's a lot of different places that how an agency can service a client, I'm curious, what are your thoughts on like, what is the role of the agency in the brand story? Because you mentioned like they might be the right person now, but they might not be the right person for later. And how does that evolve, at least in your experience?
Yeah, it definitely, especially in the performance side, right? Like my background's in performance marketing and e-commerce. So I think that is very telling, because a lot of brands, like they may have an ultimate or aspirational goal of having a full in-house team. Where you kind of own and control. And a lot of them are really open about that from the beginning. They'll sign with an agency and say like, hey, look, like we really need you to get us to this level. And then my goal is to bring it in-house. That's great when they're kind of transparent about that, because they're setting a target for you. Right. Not that that's always definitive, right? You get to a certain point, if you've added enough value and they're like, hey, we can't get rid of you. We can't afford to, that I think is a benefit too. I wouldn't be afraid of the transparency coming from a client on when they want to make a transition. But when they're growing, like let's say you're working with a smaller brand and they're kind of like at the early stage of their launch, like all of this fluffy process stuff is it's really not that important. It's all about just executing, moving fast, keep me, at a strong ROAS or a strong MER. Like I just have to have money coming in. I need to get to this level. And like you can have a really critical part in like that first leg of the race, if it's a marathon, and then, you kind of need to evolve. So I think for a larger agency, like, you can have a critical piece of their story by saying like, hey, you're coming in, this is your spend level. We're only going to do 2 channels. You're going to get 2 people on this team and we're paying this much. And you get to a point where you're like, okay, well, we need to start adding services. We need to start expanding from just our top of funnel marketing and like ramp up on the Google side. We need to start ramping up shopping. We need to actually upgrade you to Shopify, 2.0. We have resources that can help you along with all of this. We want to take over your email, right? So like you can have a critical part in growing with them. But if you are more of a boutique agency and you're going to keep your staff limited because the founders don't want to scale too fast or manage too much, you might just say like, hey, we're kind of at our limit. I think a lot of businesses don't want to do that because they want to retain the business. But I do know an agency in the space that like they consider it graduating, and they talk to these clients and say like, hey, we really help you up until you're, 20 or 30 million ARR. And then we pretty much will graduate. We'll let you graduate away from us, and we'll make those intros to strategic like agency partners that we have that kind of take our top guys. So I think that they're a critical piece of the story, and you want to have success during whatever part of that timeline is, and have the brand founder speak really highly about you and recommend, your services to other brands that are where they were when they worked with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And to that point, I think, to be fair, bigger isn't necessarily better either. Yeah. Like, I know plenty of people that do one thing pretty well. Mm-hmm. And like maybe they're the 5 million to 20 million agency, and they got a 5-person team. Yeah. And they're really good at that work, and they do the same stuff basically every day, in and out, and they're able to really iterate and get into the weeds of that. And their workload is less, and their take home is more. Yeah. Than, well, everybody but the folks at the top, and even the other folks at the top of places that have like 20 clients that need to hire, because the more clients you have, you also have larger legal, you have larger payroll, you have larger liabilities, insurances, like operating costs skyrocket with agency client volume. Yeah. And like on the side of just being a successful entrepreneur or a successful agency owner, like measuring your worth by the bank account. And I'll put it this way. I know plenty of people that run a 7-figure company that make 3 times, 5 times as much as the folks that run the 8-figure company. And I mean, the person at the top, what their actual take home is. Yeah. And it's like, sometimes people work really hard to figure out a way to give themselves a day job where they're making less money and working a lot harder.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like I have the benefit of knowing a lot of entrepreneurs. From working for 2 very successful entrepreneurs that went through an exit, and through that network, and kind of just through the businesses that I've worked with, which is great. And I know small ones, I know large ones that have exited, some that have been in business for literally 4 decades, and are still running everything and made all the money in the world. None of them are the same, right? Yeah. Like, they have different needs in their life. I know one that like really looks at an exit and a huge payday as like the measure of success, and I know some that really just want to have like something that's small and controllable that they can run for many years, make a lot of money, and just kind of enjoy what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, if you can build yourself I know some folks that have built themselves a playground. Yeah. Then they show up to work at like 10 something. They leave around 3 or 4. They're there 4 or 5 days a week, and they're balling. Like,
yeah, it's not to say that they're like lazy or anything. They're
just really good at what they do, and you don't need them. Like, and I'm like, an agency's value isn't by how much work that they do. Yeah, and let me ask with that, like, I'm curious of like, I think ultimately agencies are measured by how do they help the brand grow? How do they drive revenue? How are they helping with conversions? You know what I mean? And yeah. Especially when it's performance agencies, right? Of email or paid social search, whatever it happens to be, there is a bottom line dollar valuation. And I'm curious how you've gone about like understanding, like, helping people understand, is your agency helping with conversions? Like, what do people need to know?
I mean, the performance side, you have to help with conversion. Otherwise, that's your role.
I mean, that's the whole job. Absolutely. Yeah. But there are other places that are creative shops and web design agencies, and it can be a little bit murkier on how things are done. And
you know what, that's actually really interesting. I think when you get out of like the performance, like media side, right? Or like, you know, full service agency that does everything or almost everything that they need to run your whole store and actually deliver results. But I've been, you know, I talked to a lot of different agencies, and I've been talking to some creative ones as well. And I met with one today that does like really great production. They work with brands that are kind of at a minimum, I think they told me was 50 mil in ARR. So they're doing like big productions, but they're one-time, you know, contracts. They don't have a lot of recurring. They don't have a lot of other value in terms of going a little bit further down the funnel. They're very focused on like the one thing that they're good at, which I respect. I tell, you know, every service provider that I work with, like, don't run away from your core offering. Like, keep your identity, keep your DNA at the root of your entire service as it evolves. But I think there was a big opportunity for them to really say, like, okay, we're really crushing it on this top of funnel piece, but how do we supplement it with like everything that comes afterwards, all of the DR stuff, building out campaigns? Why aren't they doing landing pages that match like the top of funnel campaigns that they're developing and producing? Why don't they have static images that are coming with that? Why don't they have templated, you know, DR ads for TikTok, for Instagram, that are going to cut their 2-minute spot down into like 30, 15, 10-second videos? They don't have the media background, and I think that was a missing piece of like strategic partnerships with media buyers. You know, how can you work, like I was saying before, really collaborating with another agency that has that expertise and say, hey, we're really good at like the top part of this. We can execute on the bottom part of it, but we need some strategic direction. You've got that relationship there, or you're willing to work with the client's, you know, performance side. That is really going to be a symbiotic relationship that you can build. You can sell bigger packages. You can retain them by, you know, I think doing a refresh every quarter or every campaign, whatever it is, or whatever size that they are. And it opens you up not just for clients that are already spending at that much, but you've got like the growth stage clients that are like not at that $50 million stage yet, but they are getting there, and you can get them in because you offer all the DR stuff. So I think there's definitely a big evolution, or maybe evolution is the wrong word, but like opportunity to evolve the service and grow it to add, you know, more strategic value.
Yeah, no, I definitely think so. And I think where I've noticed some of the biggest issues for instance, performance marketers is just in that I think there becomes this huge conflict of what defines success, and ultimately how people are ultimately getting rewarded for the work that they're doing. You know, it's which I think goes down the rabbit hole of attribution and all sorts of stuff like that. And I think I've always taken the role of, one of the things that I did early on that was really helpful, that I kind of just got into the space because I was put into a room to. So back in the day, I was senior ad ops at a place called Hyphen, which was one of the, became part of the Nexstar Media Group, and I was there through a couple buyouts, right? It was wild, just their growth, because they had, you know, we had good clients. And one of the things that I did was I was known as like the guy that could take money from Criteo. And what I did was I built out this doc that I still use today called the Ecosystem ROAS doc. And it was literally sit there to measure incremental lift, like at a glance in a spot. And I would just say, all right, every agency, we're going to have all of our agencies. You have all of your in-house teams, whatever. We're all going to put our performance into a doc. And we're going to see, like, when we invest more in one place, what happens? Like, let's get better our investment portfolio.
Yeah.
And I think in 1 year, I probably pulled 50 million in billable from Criteo, from like,
wow,
just showing that what they didn't actually produce any result.
Yeah.
And what we were able to do is say, well, just give us that money. And then, hey, look, this number went up by more. And so we were really able to prove the bottom line change. And I think that was how we at least went about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I realized that I missed the answering the question on measuring success when I went down the rabbit hole with the creative agency example. But the point there, I think, was to, if you can develop like the DR side, sticking with that example, you can measure the success of what you're, sending back to them. So with creative, it's like, all right, well, how is this actually impacting your business? It's not just the cost of the production and our margin, but is this actually adding value? Did it drive conversion? Does the media team actually agree with that? Did they think that we were a good partner to work with in terms of giving them creative that they actually want and can use versus just dumping assets on them that, isn't built for success? So I think with your example, like obviously pulling and visualizing results, looking at, what you were doing previously, like how do we compare to your previous agency? How do we compare year over year, week over week, campaign over campaign? The new creative assets that we rolled in versus the previous ones. Are we constantly A/B testing? Are we establishing controls and then testing against those controls to always show incremental lift?
Oh man, now you're talking crazy. You're talking about the things that get me banned on Twitter for saying, like, I love it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think obviously communicating just any type of measurable success that proves out value. That's the actual value, moving away from like the perceived value part of the relationship.
Sure. I love that. And I think part of that is about their experience, right? So like, I think part of it is understanding how to create a memorable customer experience for the clients of the agency. And I mean, I was always able to say to people like, dotted line, bottom line, this will make you more money. This is a waste. And I looked at it as an investment banker. One guy said one time, he's like, you're just like a VC helping our CMO. And I'm like, I am your CMO. And they didn't like the fact that I said that on the call, but whatever. I was doing a good job. Their CMO was lazy as hell. Okay. That's fine. He was on his month 17 of his 20-month stay that every CMO has. And like, he was already taking job interviews, I think, at that point. So whatever. But yeah, like, what do you like to do, or what have you seen done well that helps these service providers and agencies create that memorable customer experience that stands above and beyond just the execution? Because the execution is a commodity.
Yeah. Yeah. So I always told my team, I know this is what the masterclass is all about, is like step one after the contract is signed is onboarding, the onboarding process. And I see a lot of agencies that just do the basics. And for the most part, that's fine, right? Like the purpose of onboarding is to say like, okay, this is what you purchased. This is what we need to get moving. We got everything. Give me access to everything. Give me your assets and we'll set up a Slack channel and, we need your goals and here we go. But what makes it memorable, I think, is like if you really extrapolate on that and you go beyond just the the basics and you dive into the gray area and you keep all of the perceived value at the forefront of that process, you're creating a good experience. So for a marketer, like to understand that, like think about how you handle CRO or how you're looking at someone's website or landing page. It's all about the user experience. You have creative and then you have to drive into like a premium experience that closes the deal. So I think it's the same thing when you're still dealing with people and they purchased a service. So having, being really on top of communicating, sending them all this material that you have worked out, especially if you can have it branded towards them and it looks really personalized and curated. I mentioned earlier, asking really intelligent questions. So don't just ask for, access to Facebook and Google and like a creative folder, but asking really deep questions on what's your origin story? How did you found the business? Why did you create this business? What problem did it solve for you? Even the objections, I think I mentioned earlier, is like, what are the fears and objections that your customers have and how do you tackle that? What are brands that you aspire towards? Like, show me creative examples of competitors, or just not even competitors, other brands that are in other verticals that you really love, like the way that they do things and communicate. So like digging into that gray area and asking those questions, materializing all of that in your onboarding like process and your docs, like that makes it really memorable. So there's gray area there, but that's still execution. And then on top of that, like you need good account people that can communicate this, that can really like, they have to have energy. They have to be professional communicators. I talk about matching the client's tone too, right? Like you never quite know if you're going to get on a call with someone new, like what's their energy level? What do they value? So, people who are people, I'm a people person. Like not to go through the old like Office Space joke of that having no value, but like there is a ton of value in understanding and reading people and making sure that like you're creating a good experience for them to meet the team and really start with you and your service.
Yeah, and I think sometimes client market fit is just, I've been with extraordinarily DR focused founders who don't give like they dread the first 25 minutes of every agency meeting. Where it's just like, hey, how you doing? Okay, great. This is what we did last week. They don't care. And to be fair, like those are my favorite kinds of people because they're just like, dude, let's just go make some money. Cool, we're done. 5 minutes, great. What do you need from me? Done. Like if you can set a timer for 15 minutes and you're done. Like I had a boss, his name was Jason Hansen, who taught me a lot. And he literally would put a timer on the wall for 15 minutes. And I had 15 minutes to get that client off the phone. And like, that was like how I was trained. It was just like, and Lord knows I could talk. So he's like, all right, Charlie, you need to get them stoked and off the phone in 15 minutes. We're booking an hour-long call. You need to give them 45 minutes back and get them to spend more money next month. That's it. Get off the phone. And those were we found the right people. I was the right guy for that. But like, and those people loved it because they had all the flowers and, rainbows and all the other nonsense that you're wasting everybody's time.
Yeah, that's actually interesting that your boss kept it like that was the rule.
Which I loved because he did that for me. 8 other people in the office didn't do it, but for me, he was like,
okay, that's really funny.
No, because he gave me specific clients. Like he gave me like
one on my team that I wish I gave that rule to.
Like at the time I was doing Joybird and Progressive Insurance and Disney and like Starbucks. And they were like, these people don't care. Give them the money, get off the phone. And like it was some other like probably borderline spectrum nerd on the other side. And all I had to do was make him look good to his boss who wrote a bigger check. And then that was my job.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Look, I mean, think about the difference in the clientele, right? You're talking about businesses where you're not dealing with founders. You're dealing with like someone that just has a job there. It's the marketing manager, director, or maybe the VP is there for like just the first onboarding and then disappears until the QBR. In that case, I mean, it's got to be business, and all you're really trying to do is you're going to connect with those people, but separately, right? Like how do we get them out to dinner? Get them drunk and then start to develop
all of that fun stuff.
But on like the founder entrepreneur side, I think more often than not, like we really get them talking with those questions, like really ask them,
I love that.
What was the origin story and why did you start the business, and tell us, like we really want to know. And
it sounds like a date.
Hey,
you're dating them, like where'd you come from, blah blah blah, right? And if you can remember those things on the second date, it's gonna probably end up in a third.
It's not that we didn't have the technical founders. We definitely ran into people that were just like, hey, I already run, like I'm the founder, but I've been running the media and I'm like in the weeds. And I'm going to be in the numbers every day. And like, they get in there. That's a tougher nut to crack, but that's where the value of like your account manager comes in. They have to know really well what switches in their own brain to pull when dealing with this kind of person. Like what am I going to spend more time on? What am I going to spend less time on? Is this person really going to value an efficient call? Can I give them 30 minutes of the 60 back? Like if I can do that, then great. And I did find that like those people typically would fill out their onboarding document with a lot more detail. So you could wrap up the call a lot earlier because they've handed you everything that you need.
Yeah, I love it. I think that just goes to show just how there is a fit to the clients and the agencies. Although sadly, I see a lot of folks say, well, the fit isn't about is about the strategy. And I don't think it has anything to do with the strategy. I think it has to do with the people, right?
Yeah.
Because the strategy is a commodity. Like, I think the strategist in the paid social space or paid search, like, yes, that's good, but that person exists 12 times under every roof. That being said, like, we've talked about a lot of things, but what about those founders that have come in? Like, I've seen a lot of people barking up this tree, and to be fair, I don't think it's necessarily completely wrong in that, like, the future of the ad agencies and marketing is we're going to see a lot less of them. I'm curious how you think about that, because I mean, I have my own perspective, but I'd love to know what you think about it.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. It's really funny. I just wrote a LinkedIn post for myself on exactly that today. That
all right, well done. I didn't see it. I promise. This is good. No, I did see it. I'm right on top.
No. I haven't posted it yet. I just.
Oh, well, then never mind. I'm over your shoulder, right here, just like back there. Yeah.
I mean, yeah. It's going to be a bigger struggle. You've got technology. That's not just AI. Everyone's just focused on AI. But I think that you've got a lot of new tech partners in the space that agencies don't necessarily know how to integrate into their service.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I talk to agencies all the time about strategic partnerships with other vendors and other service providers, especially for things that you don't offer, are really important. But ultimately, they're there not just as a value add, but as a referral partner.
Yeah.
So I meet with a lot of agencies and they're like, yeah, we're partnered with Shopify apps, with Klaviyo, whoever, as a referral partner. But like, there's these tech platforms, there's all these SaaS companies that are coming out that can allow agencies to develop services that don't require dev work, that don't require full teams and millions of dollars in investment or $100,000 in investment. And I don't think they know enough about how to like change their service to be more valuable and be more unique and say, hey, I can actually create a publishing site and create like a whole new environment and offering for my brands that other agencies don't have in-house, or native content creation, or some type of, I don't know, utilizing in my CRO platform, new shoppable videos on site where there's a couple, cool new shoppable that are doing that. So I think that's one piece in terms of staying ahead of the curve, because the agencies that are just going to do the standard, hey, we do media buying and strategy, however you define it, and creative, like that's all just going to be the status quo. And then on top of that, you've got the AI threat and you have automation threats. So agencies the threat of AI is obviously like, you can be more efficient, which means you probably don't need to be as highly staffed.
Yeah.
It's just a reality. But I think like the agencies, if they really want to survive, you're going to need to move faster and be more efficient and learn all the AI tools now, and not look at them as like, oh, that's bullshit, and you can't write copy as well as my copywriters. Like, no, use them. You can use them in a lower, smaller capacity, but like, I don't know, you have to have strategic innovation. You've got to have at least one person in your leadership team that's focused on that can say, we need to shift. We need to change our standard operating procedures, our offering, the way that we do things, so we can continue to evolve with all of the other outside factors that we have no control over.
Yeah, because otherwise you have no USP.
Yeah.
Right. And I think I just dropped a video on this one too, just what it's like I'm referencing this thing because it's top of mind, but like, I think there's a ton of people that have commodity skills and they don't realize that they're basically, I think if you have a client or you have a job where you basically show up and do the work, that's more or less kind of a handout. Like somebody else did all the work to set that up, but you're also ultimately immediately replaceable. You're not worth more.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not bringing undeniable value by combining some unique something, then why do I care? Right. And as soon as anything goes wrong, I can blame you and go off to the next guy. And so with that being said, I'm curious, like, when do you think working with an agency is the right place? Like sort of that relationship, when does it work best? And when do you need it? Because I think like there is a revolution happening through here with this self-service. I mean, Facebook, go broad, you're done. You can use ChatGPT, you're kind of done, right? Like I would argue don't use Midjourney, but you can like use creatives.io and like Canva, and like, man, I just eliminated 3 partners.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So when do you feel like agencies, when does it work best to bring somebody on, or what type of agency to bring on might be a better way of doing it?
Yeah, I mean, I think of course you have to look at the resources in your own organization. Like, I want to do whatever it is. If it's media or anything else that any other service provider offers, be shipping and fulfillment, right? Most brands don't own their own warehouses. But like, what resources do you not have that you need, that you have to outsource?
Yeah.
How much of their services do you actually need? Did you try and do it internally and fail at it? And then I think it's not just identifying I need to hire an agency, but identifying the right agency partner. Is it just going to be about execution and like their track record for brands in a similar vertical, or are you meeting and working with people that are impressing you with like their strategic thought process around your brand specifically? Are they going to do things different, even if it doesn't work? Right. Because I think with all the tech and like AI, you can have Chat GPT spit out basic stuff. Like, you can say, hey, write me a script and give it a bunch of, prompts and value props and whatever. And it'll give you a basic, what you need. But do you want to be really disruptive? Do you want to, change the narrative around your product or your vertical? Are you trying to compete with people that are with other brands that are way out of your like realm right now? I don't think that's going to come, at least not yet, from a machine. And you still need human thought and human creativity to help you do that. And a lot of the time, I think it's like multiple people brainstorming together. So I think it just depends on like where you are and what you need. Do you have the resources? Maybe you do, and like they're not cutting it anymore.
Sure.
You need fresh, you need new brains and new ideas. That could be a time to say like, hey, we're going to go to an agency. Maybe we're not looking at it long term. It could be a temporary boost, and we're going to do a 6-month contract and see if they can, be a little disruptive in what we're doing, and then take it back in house. So I think there's a lot of different ways. It's just about asking yourself objective questions, and trying to just be intelligent about, what are you trying to accomplish, and do I have the right resources to do it?
Yeah, I love it. And I would add to that, sometimes, like, I would focus, do I need this?
Yeah.
Like, for instance, at Under Outfit, we didn't hire a CRO company. Like, the CEO was handling like web page design.
Yeah.
Until we got to 40 million a year. Mm-hmm. And like the website was not great, but like that wasn't the problem.
Yeah. It seems to be, producing a lot of revenue.
Yeah, we're doing all right. And I think people just hire out because they want all the sexy things of whatever is important. But like when it's right, I think for me, it's when it's somebody that's better than you at the next best area of opportunity, hire for that in a way where, like, for instance, I've hired email teams. Yeah. And sometimes I hired them because I knew they were robust enough to just not do it poorly. And if I paid them to do the job, I was going to make profit off of that investment. And I just needed that box checked. Yeah. Like, it's checked. We're profitable. Cool. Done. Moving on. Because like I like that's not what's going to make me go from 50 to 100. Yeah. I just need to make, like, that's what's going to allow me to not screw up the 50. And their whole job is to make sure that I never need to talk to them. And I told that our buddy Dylan Ander at splittesting.com, I told him when I signed him on for a client, which they're great, I told him, like, I'm going to pay your fee, and your job is to make sure I never notice that you work. Like, I want 5x my traffic and my conversion rate to stay the same. That means you're doing a good job. Yeah. And like, that was the relationship. I'm curious with this, because it is all about the relationship, and it's all about like setting that foundation and that expectation, and also finding the right one and selling yourself. So really, I think this comes back around to something that you and I are working on, which I'm excited about, which is building that perfect like onboarding system, because part of it is making sure that even in the sales call, they understand what's going on. And I mean, we don't have to necessarily get too deep into it, because there is a masterclass. You can check that out, links down below, and I highly recommend that. But I'm just curious, from your perspective, like, what goes into building the perfect agency onboarding system, just at a 50,000 foot level? Because I think that so many people don't know what they don't know. And they also don't have a guide to help them get there. And we built that guide, but I think even if they don't check that out, like what is included in a system where you would say, I need to have X, Y, and Z all covered?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. And there's a lot of different ways that you can approach it. It's similar to saying like, well, what do I currently have in place and what am I missing? And then part of what I'm providing in the class is also like a self-assessment for post-call. But I think this separately can also be a self-assessment on like, well, what else can we include? So you know that you have the basics, right? Like what are the basics that I need to have a successful onboarding, which is of course access, just so you can deliver on whatever is in the agreement. I like to go into like, okay, what is all the other, supplemental information in the gray area that I don't have? You're essentially taking over from the sales process. Everything's happened with the seller in most traditional scenarios. And then it's being passed off to the execution team. So you're there to maintain trust. Not yes, you're starting from scratch a little bit as the salesperson goes back to doing sales and works on the next one. But you really have to maintain that trust and get as much information from the person that closed the deal. So you already have it and you feel like you were involved. So how do you really do that and record it? Make sure that you're just aware when you get into the first call and conversation so you can speak to it. Send detailed, whether it's an onboarding questionnaire or documents that you filled out over to them that actually shows and says like, hey, we've got all this information here. And what I don't have, I'm asking you for it. You want to be able to like kind of pre-prepare with templates. So first point of communication, like I'm templatizing emails that go out, welcoming them in. Here's everything that you need. Here's everything that I need from you. Making sure that like, the call is not scripted, but you have a good outline that carries it through a story from start to finish. What do I really need from you? What do I want to get from you from the beginning? What are the goals that we're setting? How am I actually recording that? And then when are we going to revisit it? And then basically like everything else that you might need.
Yeah.
Plus there are follow-ups, right? Like the intros to the team, making sure that everyone knows like, who's who, the expectations that you're setting. I think aside from just expectations, but like boundaries that you're going to set as a service provider, like that should be as part of like, it's got like a sub bullet of expectations.
Yeah. That 8 p.m. Friday email. When is that going to get answered?
Yeah. I mean, preferred communication too. It's like, hey, this is how we're going to do it. We're going to do it on Slack. Is that cool with you? 99% of the time it is. Sometimes it's not. And if it's not, like, let's talk about that. How are we going to communicate in the most efficient and effective way? Right. So there's just expectations and when will I answer? And, knowing to acknowledge a question if you don't have time to respond to it right away. That's not really part of onboarding, but just like general, client service. I don't know, just like a best practice in communication.
Yeah.
And then I think just like the follow-ups, right? Like when you finish the first process, like the self-assessment, ask yourself, how did it go? What were they like? Who are the players on their side and what are their roles? Who's going to be difficult? Who's not? Who's lacking certain knowledge that we're going to need to educate and nurture maybe? Who's really an expert in certain areas where like I may not want to step toe to toe with them here because I'm gonna, even if I'm right, gonna lose that argument every time.
Yeah.
And educating the rest of the team on that. And then, I think just the final follow-ups of like, it's not just that onboarding call, but like, what does the first month look like?
Yeah.
What does the first term of the contract look like?
Yeah.
And what are our deliverables? So having all that stuff ready, templatized, able to not just like a straight template, but like a modular template. So you can really, adjust it based on the client's need.
Yeah. And I'm super excited about what we have inside the masterclass because you're going to have all of that together. So it's sort of a like overview of all of those things in a much deeper depth with like guidelines for everything there. And I know we got to get going in a second. I just want to say that I love the idea here that the perfect onboarding sets up the successful first term because it's about the relationship and it's about getting that second check and making that relationship work. Because just as you think of an e-com business of that person coming back to buy again, like in the service business, it's do they renew, right? And
yeah, 100%. Oh, one actually critical thing that I left out of my
let's
rant,
do it.
big thing. I think it's just speed, right?
Yeah.
Like we're just talking about, tech and automation, but how much can you automate? How many triggers can you set up? Like you want the process to be as frictionless as possible. Not everything can be automated or templatized, but as much as you can. I mean, it's not necessarily for the client outside of just like the speed factor, but it's more for your team, the efficiency of your team. Like you need your team that's servicing the client to not be underwater. The more you can automate for them, the easier their lives are, the happier they'll be, on the call.
Yeah, no, I love it, man. Well, hey, dude, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And yeah, like if you just want to make sure that anybody, if they want to get in touch with you, like how do they do that?
How do they do that? Oh my God. Well, you can email me. First of all, thanks for having me.
Sure.
Yeah, so you can email me. My email is Jesse at DeBear Direct LLC.
I'll put that down below. Yeah.
We'll put that in there. You can find me on LinkedIn. I do some posting there. You can find me on Mentor Pass. You can find me, around the interwebs. So
I love it.
yeah, check me out. I'm working. I'm my consulting business is still somewhat fresh, so I'll get a website to everyone as soon as I have it. But definitely feel free to email me. I'm in a lot of the kind of like the D2C Slack community groups too. If you see me around at any type of kind of Shopify partner events.
Love it, man. Well, thank you so much, Jude. I'll let you go, and thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it. I'll talk to you later.
All right, thanks, Charlie. Appreciate it.
See you, buddy.